Hello there, you're welcome again to this class. Last class we talked about how you set up Moho for the first time. Today we're going to talk about a brief overview of Moho software. Moho software is a very intuitive program that has a lot of features. Primarily, Moho is very good at rigging and 2D animation. Moho has several parts. When you open up the software, you have your windows, then you have your tools, you have the timeline, and then you have the layer stack. Lastly, we also have the style palette. Then of course, we have the main window where we see everything that is going on in our animation. So we'll just quickly walk through each of these sections very quickly, as we'll dive deeper into some of these later on. The first is the file window. The file window is a place where you could open up new files, open up old files you've saved before, or save your current file, and a whole lot of things you could also do here, as well as exporting your final animation. The next window is the edit window. This window has features like undo and redo. So if I were to do something on my animation, I could go back and undo that feature from the edit. We also have other things here that we're going to talk about, like the preferences, where we set up our Moho and give it certain features. But we'll talk about that later on. We also have the draw window. This is where we can create shapes and do some advanced drawing in Moho software. For now, we're going to skip this because we're going to go through this later on. We also have the bone window. This is where we can reset our bones. We can add new bones and do a lot of features when it comes to creating bones. You might ask, what are bones? A quick demonstration. We have a project file opened up, and if you see, I'll select my character. You see there is a figure here that has a bone. This is the bone of the character. So if I were to move my character around, I'll use the bone to move her around. We're going to go deeper into this very soon. We also have our animation window. This is where we can focus on animation tools, like removing all the keyframes from our document. We also have scripts. Scripts are a very wonderful feature in Moho. Here you can find very interesting effects like particle effects, light effects, and so much more. We also have the view window. This is where we can display certain aspects of the Moho software and the various tools that it gives us. But for now, we're going to go to the next one, which is the window. This has several windows that we can enable or disable. Like if I click this, it opens up the action window, which is going to be very useful later on. But that's where you can add or remove windows. And lastly, we have the help window. This is where we have several help assets for us. You could check out the user manual for Moho software and get everything you need. You could find wonderful tools and shortcuts and all about the software in the user manual. So now we've covered some of the windows. We're going to look at the tools next. Moho has a lot of tools for creating and editing your characters as well as your drawings. Your tools are based on what you have selected here. This is the layer window, and if I were to select a layer, the tools would change corresponding to the layer I have selected. So let's say I create a new document. Let's just go back, File, New. This is a blank document. We have our vector layer. When I have my vector layer selected, I have tools corresponding to the layer type. So let's say I want to draw a shape. I use my draw shape tool. Each tool has its own options. These tool options can help me further fine-tune my tool. In this case, the draw shape tool. So I want to draw a circle, so I use this, and then I come here and then I draw my circle. Click and drag. With the left click of the mouse, we have our shape. There are so many tools here that we're going to go deep into very soon, but just know that all of these are tools for creating and editing my shape. We have draw tools, we also have fill tools. Fill tools talk more of what happens inside the shape and the general shape options. We also have the layer tools. This affects the whole layer. So let's say I were to have another circle. All of these circles are in one layer called layer 1. The layer window is where you find all the layers in your Moho project. All of this is inside this layer, layer 1. So I could move these shapes individually by using the transform point. So I click this and move. But if I want to move the whole layer, I come over to my layer and I transform the layer. That moves everything in my layer. I could also add a new layer if I want. Come over here, we have this button, new layer. You see we have several kinds of layers in Moho software, but I'm going to use the vector layer because that's where we can easily draw our shapes. So if I draw anything now, it's going to be in the layer 2 because that's what is currently being highlighted. So if I go over to my transform layer, I could move this around and it only affects the layer 2 shapes. So with this knowledge, you could actually create something quite complicated. For example, I could draw a character like a stick figure. So I'm going to go back. To delete a layer, you click this button here and delete the layer. So once that's done, I'm also going to delete this, but I cannot delete this layer because it's the only layer in my project. Moho by default must have one layer active. So what I could do is delete the points. So I can head over to my selection point. I click and drag over all the shapes, and then I could come over to my edit and I could cut these shapes away, or I go back, undo. When I have my shape selected, I could press delete on my keyboard. So to draw a stick figure, I could use this tool, the shape tool, the circle. I have my autofill and auto stroke enabled. Then I draw. To draw a perfect circle, you hold your shift and you click and drag. That's my head of my character. So let's say I want to create the torso. I think I'll use a square. I click and drag. So this is good and fine. But what if I want my character to be black, not white? What I could do is come over here again and start a new shape. Then I come here to my shape, select my head again for the circle. Then in my style window, I change the color of the fill to black. Press OK. And then when I do this, it now has a black stroke and a black fill. Same thing for my torso. Done. Let's do one hand. So I could draw this as one hand. Okay. Of course, I'll want to rotate my hand maybe to a bit more horizontal. So with this shape, make sure you have your shape selected, which is this shape. Okay. Then you see every shape when it's selected has various anchor points. These anchor points correspond to what you can do with the shape. So inside the shape, you see the icon of my move tool has this icon. This icon means that if I click and move, it's going to translate my shape. But then if I move my mouse to the edge, you see we have this icon, which is for scaling in or scaling out. So I can click and drag and I can make it bigger or smaller. Let's Ctrl Z or come here to undo. So the shortcut for undoing is Ctrl Z for Windows. So now we have this. I could also rotate my shape. Use my mouse here, select this. When my mouse goes to the edge of the shape, the icon changes, and this enables me to rotate my shape. So that's the hand. And of course, I can also copy this and paste this. So I could come over here to my edit, copy, and paste for my other hand. So I move this around, and here we have it. But I don't like the way it's rotated, so I'm just going to rotate this like this. So with this technique, I can build up my shape, create more parts for my character, and probably have legs. I could also decide to have each body parts to be in a separate layer. So let's say I want to create another leg in a separate layer. I come over here and select. I could rename this leg. Press enter. Let's edit that. So by double tapping on the layer, you could change the name. So I'm going to just call it leg. Apply. Okay. Now we have another layer called leg that I can come over here, create a new shape for the leg. I want to see what's underneath, so I can use my mouse wheel. I can scroll, or we also have the view, and then the zoom in and zoom out. So now I can come here, select this tool. Let's zoom in a bit. To move around your canvas, you can hold your spacebar, click and drag. So now I could rotate my leg and move it in place. So I'm sure with this knowledge we can create something very interesting. The last thing I'll tell you about is the timeline. The timeline is where you have all your animation being previewed. Just take note of two things. The first thing is the frame 0 and then the other frames. In Moho, frame 0 is where you draw everything, and from frame 1 is where you can do your animation. So I'll open up my previous example here. You could see that all the animation happens after frame 0. So if I have to press play, all of this is the animation that has been previewed in the timeline. So we're going to go deeper into the software. Just have fun, create something interesting, and I'll see you then. So in our next class, we're going to talk about how we set up a new project and how we customize it to our taste. So see you then.